Good everyone, it's Calvin here from the Coaching Company in New Zealand. We're going to talk about today some reflashing of 3UZ ECUs, a little bit about the wiring required when it's done into a stock LS430 when that car has had a manual fitted. Now this is a topic that I've watched some chats about it recently, and there are lots of people with very little knowledge talking about it, not knowing what they're on about. So I'm going to get in and I'm going to clear some of this up. For further information, I'm going to have it on my members channel, but this is going to be enough to whet the appetite of those people who need to know some stuff. But I will go over the in-depth side of it with regard to the neutral start circuits and the gear indicator switches and how they actually work, and some of the inner workings of the ECUs and what we're able to do with the reflashing in those ECUs. And I'm going to try and break it down and make it real simple. But let's get on to this, the fast version today. Early ECUs. So this is Gen 1 and Gen 1 and Gen 1. Neutral start circuit. I've done another video on that on my members channel with regard to how they work. Okay, so, and there's lots of people who wire those wrong. Also in my wiring instructions, which I do sell, I cover how to wire those properly when you're putting a manual behind them. That's real simple. Next we have this one. This is a UCF 20 non-VVTi ECU. There's also, I picked up a SC400 sequential injection OBD2 ECU the other day. Now this is an OBD2 ECU. You can use the same technique as I use on those other ones. However, they can give some other little issues. I sometimes use an ATEMU off-label. This is my test unit, and to do some people call it a trick. It's just to wire them to make it function how I like it. If this was an OBD1 ECU, so a Celsius, JDM Celsius for example, then I wire it just like those ones. Real easy. We're moving fast. Next one. Now this is actually a non-immobilizer VVTi ECU, so that's out of a 151 crown. If you manualize this one, then that is mandatory. Well, mandatory if you want it to work properly, okay? You can do some other stuff with this one and you lose VVTi. The engines run, but not as well as they should. That's why we use that ATEMU on that one. And this is actually my plug-in version, so the main plug that it needs plugs in. Right, easy. Right, moving on to 3UZ. Now we have, this is the 6-speed. I've just reflashed that one. This is my reflashing rig. And this is a 5-speed. Okay. The dynamics between these two ECUs and what we can and can't do with regard to the internals of it is quite different. There's some different protocols within those two ECUs. And so when you manualize it, you have to do different stuff to each of these ECUs to make it function correctly. Guys, we're talking about ATEMUs. And if we were discussing this topic about 5 years ago, yep, that's how we used to do it. Now, very important to note, and this is a problem that I have with what we're doing. We've got the tried and true down there, and that information has been the same. I've been doing it the same around 20 years. Yeah. So I worked out how to wire them properly 20 years ago, and I've been wiring that same way. Okay, tried and true. When the 3UZs first came out, actually, let's go to that 1UZ VVTi, this one. even though this is a non-immobilizer ECU. I was one of the first to work out how to get through the immobilizer, but we now do it a different way. So the information I showed, and that was like 2010, 15 years ago. The information we have currently is different. With the 3Z, as I said, about 5 years ago, we would have said use an ATEMU with the reflashing we had available at that time. We don't use this anymore. So if someone went to fit one of these to our reflashed ECU with our current flash tune in there, it's going to be a stuff up. This isn't going to do what you want it to do, okay? In fact, it's going to cause problems. And this is the problem that we have as we are developing further and as we're getting into the newer engines with the 1URs, the same thing is going to happen. And so I'm very careful about the words I use and what I say on how to do this. So getting back to this, now if either of these are manualized, we have a different way of setting them up and wiring them correctly. Done a whole lot of standard cars, but most of those here are autos. But in the swaps, because we specialize in doing conversions and swaps, we manualize a lot of these, and we do a lot as autos as well. And it's important that they are wired correctly. I was talking to a guy the other day in the States, and he's having some problems. And I'm trying to work out why they're having problems. And they mentioned that they're having like a throttle shutdown. When it's up and driving, the throttle has a freak out. They'll disconnect the battery, and next time it'll freak out again the first drive, and then it's good again until you disconnect the battery again. And there's this weird pedal dance thing that they do. We've never seen that. I haven't had that problem. I've had faults, and they've always thrown throttle codes, throttle issues, fault codes. Now, if there is a fault code with one of these reflashed ECUs, there's a reason, and it's often a wiring reason. When I do a wiring loom, I put them on an engine and I run them up. And we do looms like this. A lot of our 3Z looms are done like that. So as far as the setup for the manualizing, it's just part of our normal wiring loom because we're doing it in-house. It's not even a conscious job for us now. It's just how we wire it. And we just set it up, wire it, out it goes. But I've sat down and I've done some comparisons. The car that I'm referring to at the moment has a gear indicator switch or park neutral switch, indicator combo switch, fault code for one of those. So that is and there's different shapes, but they all do basically the same thing, and they do interchange between the models. So it's a gear indicator switch or gear indicator start inhibit combination switch. It's got a fault code for one of these. As I said on my members channel, I will explain more about that circuit like I've done for the early ECUs and the interaction with the ECU. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to show how to remove the fault code out of a flashed 5-speed ECU in a factory LS430, okay, that's been manualized, and how to do it properly. Now, I haven't worked on the car, okay, so what I've done is I have reverse engineered what we do in our looms. As I said, it's just a normal part of what we do, onto the motor vehicle. I'm going to do it with my own car because I happen to own, well, I own like 5 of them, but I drive an everyday driver. I've got a LS430, and I'll use that as my test car to show there are 2 wiring changes that need to be made when fitting our ECUs, our reflashed ECUs, or any of my associates, any of the associates, and I'm part of a group of people who flash these cars, into a factory car that's been manualized. And if it doesn't get done and you are experiencing a fault code, then if the wiring hasn't been changed, then this fault code will occur. Now what I don't know is where the accelerator fault comes from. I haven't experienced that. Not in that sense. I've experienced ones because I've put a wire in the wrong place. There's been a throttle body at fault. There have been other sensors at fault. There have been seized throttle bodies, all those sorts of things. Okay, so I've experienced those, but they always throw a code. So this exact weird shutdown of the throttle is something new, but in any diagnosis, what we do is we fix known faults. And one common code is the brake light switch, and that's simply a wiring fault, and I don't believe it has any negative outcomes, okay? But I know how to solve that one. I'll do a different video on that topic. Let's go out to my car. Let's do some wiring changes, as I said. And it's a 5-speed, so from 2000, we had them here in 2000. The USA got them from 2001 model year to 2003, and we will do those changes. And as I said, I'm replicating what we do in our wiring looms when we make them, because we modify wiring looms all the time, and it's just part of the normal job. Okay. Let's go get into it. This is a 5-speed. This is a 6-speed. 5, 6. And I write my own codes on the ECUs that I reflash. And then I put some notes. These notes can be removed on a bit of paper. Okay. But I always have an identifier on the ECU. 6, 5. Working with the 5-speed. Right, first modification is we need to take this wire here, and this plug there, that's got the big start wire in it, and in pin 4, this loom, which this is a LS430 5-speed loom. It's just a rubbish loom that I've rated for other things. You can see there's no plastic covers on it. I've used them for another job. Okay, so this is just a leftover loom. So I'm going to pop that wire out of there, and I'm going to give it an earth in here. So, real easy. I'm popping pins, but you could just cut it off. So you could just cut that blue wire and join it into any of these earths right here. Okay, any of those would be fine. So same wire, pin 1, 2, 3, 4, and it goes. Put back in, and then I've pushed it into that joiner. That is modification number 1. Now the second modification is in the relays and fuses. So these 3 connectors, they go to the engine harness. That's those 3 there. These 2 go to the body harness, and those 2 need to be modified. We're going to use this red wire, but of course we can normally take it from the other side of that red wire. Right, so the next modification is we're joining this red wire here. Can we get it? There we go. That wire there. Now this side is, the top side is for it goes into the engine harness. So I normally do it on the bottom side of this plug. Okay, so I go down under there, but it's that red wire, and if you wanted to, you could pop the pin out, or you could cut that wire off, okay, and put a connector in it. That would mean it is easy to disconnect. or do as I do is I go underneath and I run the wire up here, up through here. So it's got to go into this A plug, into A12, and A12 is a green black wire. We take that wire there and we connect it onto there like that. So this red, that green black, and this can be cut off. So where it goes off into the wiring loom, that way, cut that off. If you're using this side, same deal. That pin can be removed and just tied back. Okay, so you don't need that red wire going into the harness anymore, and it's best, I feel, to remove it. Of course, when I manualize them, I take the transmission loom out of it. That's gone. And that's one of the things that we are doing when we're modifying these. Okay, and so I do recommend doing that, but by cutting that red wire, okay, and cutting that wire, so there's then 12 volts coming from the chassis, from the body, up into that A12. That is the modifications that need to be done with a reflashed ECU from the associate group that I am part of, with a manual into a stock LS430. Okay, those are the modifications that need to be done. Right. By doing those modifications, it should result in no fault code for the gear selector start inhibit switch. Okay. If there's still a fault code there, then there are other issues that need to be diagnosed. But that fault code should not be present with the reflashed ECU once those two wiring modifications have been completed. We can probably see where that first one is on the car, right? So there's the earth block. So I put an earth in there, and I put that blue wire. I, of course, so this blue wire would be cut off. It comes up here. You cut it off. I would put a crimp on it and just poke it in there like I did. We'll put a jump wire in it. Cutting it off is fine. This wire doesn't need to go into the wiring loom any longer. It just needs to go from here into an earth. So that's really simple. That's modification number 1. Modification number 2 is red wire to that green black wire. Now, I'm going to reiterate that our group's reflash, and that is the correct process on the 5-speed automatic transmission ECU that has been reflashed to manual, had the transmission stuff deleted as such. All fault codes need to be removed. Okay, they should have no fault codes because we've turned everything off. However, it needs those modifications to be done correctly to ensure that there is no fault code for the gear shift indicator switch. Okay. Now, the car in question's also got some throttle stuff that it's doing wrong. I can't guarantee that this is going to fix that, but I'm interested to know if it does, because I know that this car's got that wiring fault to throw that code. Well, if it hasn't got this fault code, if it isn't a wiring issue, okay, there are 3 possible reasons for a fault code. There's something wrong with the reflash. Now, the problem is I've used that reflash 15, 20, 25 times. No problems. And our associate group shares some of those flash tunes. So the chances of it being that is incredibly next to nothing. And I'm pretty much going to say it's not. It's a 0. There could be a fault in the ECU. Now, we are repairing a lot of these ECUs. They are failing now. Both the 5-speed and the 6-speed. Talk on the internet, they only say the 6-speed. It's a load of crap. We're seeing a lot of 5-speeds that are requiring some maintenance internally in the hardware of the ECU. Okay, and a reflash won't fix the hardware. Third possible option of why it's got that fault code is this wiring has not been done correctly. If that car was in my shop, that's what I'd be doing. First, I'd be plugging my scan tool in, checking for fault codes, seeing what's going on, and monitoring live data. I'm on the other side of the world. That's about as much as I can do, and the stuff is available. Code readers, live data access is easy to do these days, so that's what needs to be done to solve that problem. I reckon it's going to sort it. We won't know, and until it's tried. Certainly if it was here, it'd be a piece of cake, but it's not here.
Hope that's been helpful.
Now, of course, if you've got this far and you want to know some more, on my membership channel, I will do a more in-depth of what's going on inside that ECU and what we're doing and what we can and can't do and what we can and can't achieve with the reflashing. There are limitations. I'll show you the relationship between the neutral start switch and the gear indicator switch on the 3UZ ECUs. I've already done it on the early ones. I've done it on those Gen 1 ECUs and all the non-VVTIs pretty much. I've done that relationship video on how to do it and how to manualize them correctly. Okay. This stuff's also covered in my wiring instructions, and there's a couple of other things I do when I reflash the ECUs myself as a communication to my customers. Okay, we'll discuss that further. If you are a wiring customer, wiring instructions customer, I'm going to try and do a special video for the people that support me, support my channel and support my work. Right, hope that's been helpful. Talk to you soon. Catch you later.